I have Matt Workman back again. He's been on the podcast before, but you've been up to so many insane things, Matt. I can't even track it all on social media, but anybody not already following you should check you out because you are up to interesting business. How is it going?
Pretty good. Yeah. Thanks for having me back on. It's also nice to just talk to someone else. I feel like I guess I do Zoom calls and stuff like that, but I have been right here for a very, very long time. I was supposed to be at conferences and whatnot, so this is the
I
next best
know.
best thing.
This was going to be my big year for conferences. Like this was going to be the first year I was definitely going to go to WWDC. I was going to go to
Oh,
NAB this year. I
mm,
was just excited about all these things, and well, obviously that's not happening. But I was trying to attend a little bit of the virtual conferences I could. There was the Sound Devices hosted a sort of replacement audio conference, just streaming stuff on YouTube, and brought a bunch of other companies together to announce products. So I was checking that out, but it is not the same.
no, it's definitely not. I want to support those, and I've been asked to speak on a bunch, but I'm just like, if it's gonna be like some of them are like paywalled too because it's a conference, right? So it's like, okay, so we'll pay to go to those, but then in general it's like they just don't have the following like as worth it for me. It's like I could just make my own video that would probably do better, or like I would host it at this point, versus going to the conference is like completely different because you meet them in person. It's just like that's the value for me.
Well, or a big challenge is that watching a stream, a lot of brands are coming up. They're like, well, I don't need your product. Like I'm within 10 seconds, I'm like, oh, that's not what I need. And if you're at a real conference, you would just walk by the booth and keep walking to the next booth. And that's
Mhm.
part of the discovery process, right? You're just like finding stuff you didn't expect to, but you can keep moving. When you're watching a video stream, there's none of that. You're just like, you just got to sit through it and keep watching it and hope that the next one is still interesting. But what are you doing to occupy your time? I mean, so I know I've mentioned you on the show a few times since because there's a bunch of cool stuff you're up to, but I know you could describe it way better than I could.
So the catch-all term for now is called virtual production. Generally, what I've been doing. And I think like in the mainstream, like the biggest flagship example of that is The Mandalorian. So that was shot, or a lot of it was shot against really, really, really large LED walls. And the video that was on the LED wall was a live 3D render with like a tracked camera. So if the real camera moves around Baby Yoda, the virtual environment basically shifts with it, so that it really gives this like kind of great illusion of the live action actors being in that set, and then those LED walls then light the real set as well. And so that's like the highest end form of virtual production. So I've been was able to shoot a demo of that, basically a demo shoot for that kind of technology with that same Mandalorian team for SIGGRAPH, rest in peace conferences, last year. My first and probably not last. It's pretty morbid to say last, but
Yeah,
I'm not
no,
sure
come
when.
on.
Not sure when exactly we're gonna do demos like that again. But
Yeah.
yeah. So I was able to shoot basically a mini Mandalorian and kind of show that tech before Mandalorian came out, which is really exciting. And then since then, I've built my own little stage in my house and just kind of been working on that kind of stuff.
I think last time we were talking, we had just been hearing a little bit about the Mandalorian. I don't think it had quite come out, so nobody
Mhm.
really understood what you were talking about in a way. We're like, we
Yeah.
saw some of your demos, but I think the mainstream public hadn't encountered the real potential of what this technology can do. And since then, yeah, the demo that you made went super viral. Like everybody saw that, and since then, the Mandalorian behind the scenes has come out.
Hmm.
And I think now everybody realizes, oh, this is gonna be big. Like this is something we're all gonna be talking about in any sort of behind the scenes or VFX or any of that stuff soon. And I think there's a good chance a lot of listeners won't necessarily be at a level where they could start doing, working on the types of productions that you're talking about. But we all know it's cool. We all know like not only is it just fun to learn about, but there will be some hopefully more approachable or easily digestible version of it coming soon that hopefully we can all play with a little bit. Um, right now, with the stuff that you're using, like most of the tools in your toolkit seem to be primary like consumer-ish products, like pro
Hmm.
consumer products, not super high-end precision technical gear that was custom built just for you. What does it take to do the stuff you're doing right now in terms of investment?
Yeah. So like with that in mind, just like, I'm interested in the high end for sure. But that's not
Hmm.
something people own. So yeah, I started like doing what I call like indie virtual production, and it really basically starts off with having an HTC Vive, like just a VR headset with the controllers, and because that system can basically track the position of the controllers, like you can imagine, like that's how it works. Like you play VR games, it's like tracking your hand controllers. If you
Hmm.
basically stick one of those controllers on top of a real camera, you're like, I don't know the percentage. You're like 50% of the way there. Not like in quality, but like as far as tech. Like to do that kind of stuff, uh, basically, if you're not using a Vive, it jumps up from being like $1,000 for a Vive to being like 50,000 to 100,000 for high end trackers, right? So like a big part of the illusion is to basically match a real camera and a CG camera, and the tracking aspect of it um, it was like a huge barrier, and now I do it very
Hmm.
indie. I think you can see it maybe behind me, not for the podcast people, but like there's a Vive
For the
tracker.
video people, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
imagine a
the
Vive
the
tracker or VR controller on top of a camera. That's literally the first step, and it's pretty prosumer, like you said.
but what it reminds me of is the things I had seen like this before were Avatar behind the scenes,
Yeah.
where they're walking around, with the green screen and a somewhat real, half real looking camera,
Hmm.
and wherever you point it is what you see in um, the virtual space. What, not in terms of like professionalism, but in terms of approach, what kind of gap is there between the techniques used back then for Avatar and the type of production we're talking about right now?
It's probably worth, kind of breaking down maybe the three types of virtual production that are pretty common at this point.
Please.
Yeah, so the first kind is all CG, and this is like like your Avatar or certain
Hmm.
Lord of the Rings type scenes. And so you have just all you have is something that's tracking the position, like a Vive controller, and like that is basically just controlling a virtual camera. So it's all virtual, and the thing you're doing is you're adding like human handheld motion to it, and you can basically see into this little window of the virtual world. But that's it. You can just see in the monitor the virtual world, and you're just looking around. I feel like there's more and more examples of that kind of stuff now with like Apple AR kit and whatnot. It's somewhat kind of known how that
In
looks.
that case, you still need like a team of artists doing all of the other sides of production, like art direction and acting and animation, and like all of that stuff is happening somewhere else, and you are the camera crew.
Yeah, and I do a lot of that, and there's a lot of interest from like you can imagine the video on demand platforms right now to execute all CG stuff. Like I've been consulting and talking with a lot of companies that are going into pitches and meetings to execute that way. And so like it really comes down to, in my opinion, the camera work and lighting is kind of what the stuff that I do. And then the mocap for the actors. If you're typically going to do mocap, it's getting more affordable to just like have a suit and versus hiring a team of animators to animate every single aspect of it. The motion capture actually makes it um, more and more approachable. And I'm doing a short film like that right now. I just worked with a mocap team remotely. We kind of both made this little short as far as like what happens. They're a professional mocap studio. They did the mocap remotely, and I was watching it on Zoom. And then they essentially send that to me, the mocap data, and then I film it in my house again with my all virtual tools. But I film it and light it to try to make it look very realistic. So that's like the first type, and that's like that's basically your avatar. And like the difference
Mm-hmm.
of what I do and what they were doing is none at this point. It's very little. Actually, mine's a little bit ahead because I'm rendering in real time at a very high graphical fidelity. But we have to remember this is like how many
Right.
years between then and now. They were like you said, like building custom stuff. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
get to
of
inherit
course.
that basically and just be able to
Yeah.
use Unreal Engine and a Vive. They make it basically trivial for me.
A lot of this is what makes the work you're doing so interesting at this moment, because we're all at home right now, but all of a sudden you're able to do stuff that would seem like it was created with a bigger crew, or can just feel like part of a future. Like, who could have imagined that video production could be remote work and you could still be collaborating with other people and be part of a team and doing it in a home studio where you just set up a green screen, lights, and some camera equipment. I don't what's it been like working from home for you right now? I don't know about you, but I can't focus on anything and can't wake up in the morning. Is like, Are you still as efficient as you were before? Because I know I'm not.
Yeah, well, you were like traveling all the time, right? That was like a huge part of it, and like I'm sure like being inspired by like the new locations and waking up in the morning and seeing the sunset. Like I've seen your Instagram, like I'm sure that's a part of that's a driving force for a lot of creators. So I can imagine waking up in the
I
bed
mean,
every day, you're like,
yeah, totally. Like it's not something I should be complaining about, but it's big changes like that are just hard to adapt to and hard to create a new schedule and a new everything. I mean, literally every detail of how we work. It's like, okay, let's figure it all out from scratch now. Other than there was always a studio component for us, so
Mhm.
basically it's refocusing on one aspect of what we were doing. Whereas I realize there are some people that just can't do what they were doing before at home. So I think we're still in a very privileged position to be able to do any of our work. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, I've been, 5 years ago, I kind of started to transition from freelance DPing to being a developer. So I've been pretty much working from home anyway. I go out and do some shoots. They're mostly like R&D jobs, like what I did with Epic Games and the LED wall. But I'm pretty much working from home already. And so this doesn't actually change all that much for me. The main difference is like my kids are home from school, so they're always around, which is a good thing too. But as far as distraction, that's a little bit more. But for me, I
mhm.
pretty much get to keep doing this, and essentially the lockdown and the shutdown of the film industry, and basically what will come is the reimagining of the film industry. Like we have to be creative about how we go back to work. There's a lot of articles, I read them every day. I just read one recently about what people think it's going to look like when you go back. Is that people are look to change. Virtual production
Mhm.
was coming. Mandalorian is like, oh, that's a great use case. Like maybe we'll do that. And there's actually a bunch of those stages up in LA now because they're like, hey, this is good. We'll do this for some things. Now all of a sudden, there's full CG executions that are, for all intents and purposes, animation. But when we go back to shooting real actors, it's like those sets need to be very small. Like you can't have a million
Mhm.
people. Like a film set is like the worst case scenario for
Well,
spreading a
yeah, could you
virus.
actually spell that out a bit? I've been really curious about I mean, we're all wondering because nobody has the final answers here, but what will a ramp up of film production looks like? Because if anybody listening doesn't know, I mean, nothing's getting made right now.
No,
There's
nothing.
not a lot of yeah, there's very little that's being filmed anywhere, and especially anything big, anything we're used to in terms of a big Netflix release or a theatrical release, like all that stuff is pushed
Oh yeah.
sort of indefinitely, and now we're getting this cascading effect where you can see it in the Marvel universe, especially everything that was booked for, you know, October is now in January. So anything that was in January is now coming after this. So I don't even know how they will ever reconcile this because it's going to be such a big bump. I'm sure some things will end up getting cut. Some they'll have to do a hard reset on actually, and even in terms of scripts, I think a lot of planned scripts will resonate very differently if they just film something that was written in pre-lockdown universe. Now we've all been living in, knowing what a pandemic's like. It
Yeah.
may just feel different if it doesn't take any of this into account.
Yeah, any like scenes at like a sporting event, you're like, oh, what is this? Is this like a
Yeah,
period
yeah, a
film or
little
something?
cringy.
Like,
But yeah, just in terms of like production, what do you think's going to happen? How are we going to start up again?
um, I'm not a doctor, but like, so when I read from Hollywood Reporter and Variety, like they're polling, and I'm privy to what the unions are up to some degree. They mostly want to protect their workers, So I think the majority of them are like, until there's like a legitimate cure and like basically like government sanctioned, like this is how we do things. That's their job, is to not let you go back. There's some
Hmm.
state, I know some people that are about to jump back in. I've heard like June for some things, but that feels very risky. And like, so what basically I'm hearing at the moment, this is all could change tomorrow, is that small productions can kind of go back. And that's where virtual production sort of slides in, is that like, say we're shooting an LED execution, it's like, okay, well, there's basically no traditional art department, or there's a very small one because there's not much that's real on set compared to the whole set being real. That's a massive art department, like massive. Everyone together, like literally hammering sets together.
Right.
So that part gets smaller. And then the actors, it's like you have like one actor on stage or two, right? And they have to like, um, you're talking like remote camera work where like the camera operators are possibly not even in the same room. It's all like remoted in. And then the lighting is virtualized as well. So I think things like that are possible, and we see huge interest from studios that want to start shooting their content. They're like, we were going to build those sets, but now we're 100% looking at walls. Now we're looking at virtual production. So the small ones we can kind of see go back, but what I hear from the unions and like, you know, big productions, it's like I said it before, it's like that is the worst case scenario for trying to contain something like this. It's like
Mhm.
I think I wish I had the quote, but like Jody Lee Lipes, the DP, said it's like a film set with like, you know, social distancing isn't a film set. It's like that's not
Right.
like we're like, you know, it's like the camera, like there's like five of us like all just like crammed together filming, you know what I mean? Like the first, like we're just all
Yeah,
like
totally.
so close. It's like, and that's, we're all looking at each other, we can hear each other breathe, like I know who's breathing behind me, and then like it makes this like, you know, live organism of filming a set so like magical and fun. You know, it's like what I think a lot of people love about it. You see that and you're like, wow, that is incredible. Like all these people are like completely synced together and making this film happen, and that's like movie magic. But in the lens of, you know, the virus, it's like that's terrible. That's
Mhm.
just not, can't happen. So, you know,
Yeah.
all these big movies, there's hundreds of people on set, and it's like that just can't be. And then the legal, um you know, the legal responsibility to take care of those people falls on the studio. So if people are getting hurt, like if someone gets, you know, God forbid, gets hurt and dies on set, it does happen. You know, it's big news.
Mhm.
It's like a big deal. So you multiply that by anyone, you know, the percentages of people that get very ill or die, you know, from this. It's like you just can't have movie sets like that until there's like a very clear path forward to completely prevent it or cure it. So those big productions, it's basically a huge hold. Like there's no way to go back into a set like that. But we're seeing smaller sets maybe happen, and it's for me being kind of like at the sort of like the front of virtual production at a certain angle, is that it's accelerated virtual production like a thousandfold. Like it's great. Like the
Mhm.
amount of people that reach out, virtual conferences, virtual concerts, like the music industry. Like you're seeing, we could talk about Fortnite if anyone knows about it, but like
Yeah, that
you know,
Travis Scott
virtual,
thing.
and then Major Lazer yesterday, Diplo, live streaming into Fortnite. It's like people need to do their, you know, sports is looking at, you know, interesting angles as well, and it's like people are gonna try to figure out remote, but like when will we go back into like the everyone on set together? I'm not sure. I hear things like for like the big movies, it's not until like 2021, and that's probably just like a
Yeah.
placeholder to see what really happens.
This episode is brought to you by Clean My Mac X, a versatile piece of software for your Mac. It replaces dozens of other optimization tools, making your Mac cleaner, faster, and safer. In 12 years, it's transformed from a simple Mac cleaning app to a powerful all-in-one solution loved by thousands of users. It's recently been released in the Mac App Store, which is further proof that it is a legitimate and safe solution for your MacBook. Clean My Mac X gives you control over files and apps on your Mac. It scans your storage and reveals tons of hidden junk that can be safely removed. And what's most important, it doesn't touch your essential system files, so it just scans your computer for malware, including adware, spyware, trojans, and other culprits that may steal your data. It's also really helpful when you want to delete apps or big programs that might have lots of little files hanging around. It allows you to uninstall several apps all at once, which can save a surprising amount of space on your Mac. And speaking of free space, there's a new feature called Space Lens, which basically lets you dig through all the folders on your Mac and visualize them all at once. You can see where big files are hiding and basically the heaviest folders that you can clear out and conveniently quickly find more storage that was kind of just hiding on your hard drive already. And now you can get Clean My Mac X in the Apple App Store and use it on all of the devices that share an Apple ID. So follow the link in the show notes to speed up your Mac's performance. Thanks again to Clean My Mac X for supporting the show. Yeah, I see a little bit of it through the lens of my dad, who is in a film union and does set construction, and he
Oof.
happens to have
Yeah.
one of the very few jobs where, so he basically like runs a CNC machine, so he's like cutting out
Mm-hmm.
big pieces of sets. So he just goes into his personal little office with a big saw and is literally alone for 10 hours and then goes home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he's been able to keep working, but the rest of everyone else is almost gone. Like this huge warehouse of stuff
Yeah.
being produced that's usually, working around the clock. Not only because it's not required, but most people couldn't do it safely. So it's just sort of interesting. There's very few little sections that still can be done on their own, and everything else is kind of shut down.
Yeah.
But yeah, same for the type of production that we do. I mean, nothing we do is virtual. Like we had a video job the day the lockdown started. We were driving to it at a ski resort, trying to basically, like, we kind of can see that things are slowing down. We have this one last job, and there's only two other, like, there's only going to be four of us
Hmm.
on set doing it, and we'll be in the wilderness. And then on our way there, we got a text like, okay, well, sorry, you're gonna have to turn around because the government asked us to close today. Like, all right, well, I guess that's the end of it. And so all of our commercial stuff has been same thing. We're gonna be waiting for who knows how long. And I don't know. I mean, so what'll be interesting about it coming back is at this like medium level of like smaller budget stuff. I think the first thing everybody turned to is like, well, what can we do with stock footage? But that's not all that
Hmm.
interesting. So, there'll be this adaptation period, but with the stuff that you're working on, the things that you're working on still will require a lot of work. I mean, so in indie production might have some challenges adapting to a virtual set because now there's I imagine there's a lot of manual work that's required. Like if you've got like mocap at home, like let's say actors can basically record themselves or work with just very few other people,
Hmm.
then you still need digital art being done. So that means artists sitting at computers. And I imagine a number of them, like it'd be a challenge to have just one or two. I mean, how many people are required to do a small scale virtual production?
So the hardest part is the digital human, if that's the execution, like that's,
Mm.
getting the digital human made or, licensing one and then puppeting it correctly. That's the hard part.
We didn't get around to you explaining the other kinds of virtual production, which I think we only got around to the full virtual. What other options do we have out there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so to bring it back to the three types of virtual production, I can do it real quick. Also, I want to talk about like what my agency's been doing for remote DP work. It's been kind of interesting. But like three types of virtual production, it's like all CG, right? It's like digital humans in mocap suits, or digital humans that are run by a mocap suit, and then digital cameras that there's no real camera. And that's actually the easiest because it doesn't require everyone to be there, and there's no actor. But the more interesting type for the live action people is then called mixed reality. That's the second type, is mixed reality, and that's where you're typically filming a real human, maybe with like a partial set, like a desk or a couch. Think of like the news, and they're against a green screen, right? And we've kind of seen this, and
Hmm.
so you can still move the camera. And when you look through the camera, you're doing a live comp, and that live comp though isn't just like like a static image; it's the full 3D set. And I've been doing a bunch of that, and they've been doing that on the news and live events. And augmented reality is when you add a CG character then on top of that whole thing. You'll see that on the news like every single day. They've been doing that in broadcast for quite a long time, and now it's very sophisticated and pretty much turnkey solution, just extremely expensive turnkey. And then the third type is LED wall virtual production, where it's not a green screen anymore. It's a LED wall that's emitting light like it was the real world. That's the goal of it. And then the walls lighting the people, and now you get reflections too, and you don't have to chroma key anything. Like you're not sitting in a green room.
Hmm.
And if you go watch the behind the scenes of the Mandalorian, it's like magical because like you can basically suspend your disbelief and just be like, hey, we're all looking at this together. It's like all the benefits of VR, except we can actually
Oh yeah,
all see
it's
it. So it's
cool.
like it's a party. It's like when I was like, I want to shoot that stuff like 24/7. Like that's like kind of my life goal at this point. But the whole lockdown sort of puts a hamper on like, oh, like I don't
Yeah,
really
slows
know.
that one down.
It
Hmm.
sure does. Yeah, I'm like, you can run those somewhat small crew, but it's like, but you still need an actor. And all the big, like I hear from the big actors that a lot of them are like, yeah, we're not coming back, like not anytime
Hmm.
soon. They're like, why would they? There's no need for, like, they're like, we've got. I'm not say like, but it's like, I'm assuming they have plenty of money. Plenty
Hmm.
of people are like, we really need you to like VO these animated films that are being made. It's like they've got plenty, but it's like there's no point in risking their health over it. They're not like hard
Yeah,
up
of
for it. So
course.
it's like, so if the stars basically are just like, yeah, we're not down, we're not coming back until this is safe, then there's just no movies literally, unless it's like all new actors and whatnot. But yeah, those are the three types. And while it's still in my head, you were talking about like shooting, like, pivoting and shooting. So I'm on Gersh, which is a talent agency. They do above the line and below. I'm obviously below the line as a DP. Um, and immediately what was interesting is when this happened is they sent out I think this is public. I don't think they would care if I said this, but like they sent out this like questionnaire, and it was like, so what do you have at your house? Like what camera gear,
Right. Yeah.
what lights, what people, what locations, like, or if you live in like Montana, do you have like a farm you could go film and be safe about it? And just
Hmm.
what do you have that you could do right now? And I got that stuff, and I talked with my agents about it, and like there's basically like they still need to shoot content. Like I won't say the names of the clients, but you could kind of imagine if you've seen the commercials out there, it's like some of that stuff is shot by DPs in their house. They're direct, and
Right. Yeah.
it's like their family, and then your family becomes talent, and it's like you do what you can, and like that's legitimately happening. I thought that was I was like, so like all these like big DPs now, it's like if they have gear and they're so willing, it's like you're a YouTuber now. Like you are
Yeah.
filming at your house, but like you're getting like more or less agency rate, and then like it's like legit buyouts for the talent and whatnot. So that was very interesting to see.
I had that realization almost right away. I suddenly had a different relationship with all the gear that I own, because usually I look at my gear and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool, but I can't wait to get my next camera. Like this is all fun, but I'm always thinking about the next thing that I'm going to get, and it really that
Hmm.
was brought home when all of a sudden I realized there's kind of going to be a freeze on everything that I own. Like, we don't have any new jobs coming in. I can't justify buying new stuff or buying something for a job. And
Hmm.
everything I own, its value is so much more in like what can it actually do for me? The things that are practically useful are suddenly much more useful, because I don't just plan on expanding my kit in the near future, right? Like I don't know what that timeline is going to look like.
Hmm.
So I also imagine that like DPs that aren't owner operators, if they don't have, if they're used to shooting Alexa and they don't own one, they can't do exactly the same thing that they usually do at home. And all of a sudden, just that relationship of what you actually have changes. I mean, I don't know. You just take some of these things for granted when they're just part of your normal workflow, and all of a sudden it's like, well, the everything in my backpack. That's what I got to work with for the foreseeable future. And I did order a new switcher, but that's kind of about it. So, and I'm
No, a
sure,
new
yeah, for
Canon
some people
R5.
that are used to, yeah, some people that are used to working on a bigger set and not owning any of it, obviously this is a very different world where, like you're saying, it's like, well, what do you got? What do you got at home? Because that's what you're going to be working with. There's also a really beautiful Apple commercial recently, which, I have no idea if it ties into any of this, but the unboxing of the iPhone SE,
Hmm.
and it was just that was one of the best reflections of current culture I've seen in a big budget commercial. Yeah, again, no idea how it was produced, but it's just a guy at home dressed very casually, some very simple beautiful shots of unboxing a new iPhone, and it's just like, yeah, like how does Apple get get it right so often? And yeah, I mean, it looked like it could have been shot in the way that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, well, there's no question that like if you have like a window in an iPhone, honestly, you could, and how to frame up and
Yeah.
make a story happen, that it would look great and could be compelling. There's almost no question. That's not even like it's not that's objective. You could just do
Yeah, of
that. So
course.
I think it comes down to just like just good old storytelling. Like, can you make it happen? You don't
Yeah.
really need the whole apparatus. Like the gear and all that stuff is so that you can move like insanely fast relative, it's like because everyone like on a film set, it's like everyone has like one dedicated job more or less, and it just allows people to concentrate and move very quickly versus like if you've ever one man banded something, you're like, oh, forgot the battery, like, oh, didn't turn the sound, like that kind of stuff is like in a
I do
very
that all
solo.
the time.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. YouTubers, like,
Yeah.
yeah, we know, but it's like, so like in that capacity, you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
got all the time in the world. But when X actor costs 100,000 per hour of being there, you're like, no one messes up anything. It needs to always work. So yeah, that's like the big difference. But yeah, if you're like me with like any camera that's in this room and this window next to me, if I take the sound blanket down, it's like I could shoot something. It would be great. Technology is definitely there, and yeah, the value of the gear you have when this happened, I was like, I'm pretty good, except if the internet starts to get throttled. That will start to really, really hurt me
Yeah.
because we see that in
Yeah.
Europe much faster than we do in the
Yeah. Yeah.
States, as always with that type of like kind of law, that sort of legal stuff. YouTube and whatnot, starting to throttle down, is that like everyone's home, so it's like if the ISP at an ISP level, if they basically throttle it down, it's like that's really bad for me. But other than that, like I'm able to operate. But like, they could just like, DoorDash or Amazon, or if anyone's like, hey, guess what, shipping's like 5 times the amount, it's like, and you do what about it? Nothing. Like the government would have to come in.
Yeah.
Same thing with the ISPs. If they're like, cool,
Yeah.
we're throttling down, but if you still want that, it's like, 2,000 a month. Like it's feasible. That would be like the main thing for me that would um, be bad. And obviously, if we lost power, everything I do is on the computer. So
Yeah.
I would be like, well, now I'm gonna just go read, I guess, like a book. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't
Then
have
we'd
much to
really
do.
learn to chill out.
We
But
would go insane because there'd be no talking to anybody. I guess if we had like my landline's internet, I couldn't even call anyone, right? Like, how would you talk to anybody at this point?
yeah, I've never been so grateful for the internet before. It's like, it's definitely this connection of sanity. And even, I've talked about this before, but the role that podcasts play in my life right now, where they've always done this to an extent of being a replacement for some social interaction. But now I've
Hmm.
really realized it, where I'm like, I'm having, 30 to 50% less actual conversations a day. So listening to other people have one can definitely keep me a little more sane and feeling like I'm socializing even when there's no one around to socialize with. But
Yeah, I imagine the live streamers must be like way, way up. I'm pretty sure I've heard that they are, and it's like because like that's another
yeah.
form is like people. It's like basically how streamers work is they they build a community and they talk and they do their thing, but like I think 50% and more of the people that are there are just actually there to talk with the other people in the chat. So like I think things like that are like way, way up. And then if we look at like Fortnite's new like basically metaverse that they're doing now is like that is way, way up for my like insane, like unprecedented.
Is Fortnite just becoming Second Life? Like, are they, they're just
Basically,
being a world you can just go live in?
yeah, it's been pretty open that that's their like one of their main goals is like I think
Hmm.
Facebook's numbers rival like Facebook, and for concurrent for events is like way, way higher than anything, like more than like a Netflix even. It's like there you'll get like
Hmm.
they do a live event. It's like what was it, 30 million people saw the Travis Scott
Yeah,
thing all at
those
once,
were crazy numbers.
and multiplied by the everyone being home. But now it's like the need for it from the sports and the music industry to be able to like make money off of that sort of stuff. Like I don't know the deals, about the back end of it, but I imagine maybe Travis Scott gets a percentage of like the skin sales or something like that. It's like that's probably not something they were looking at before, but now it's like I watch all these
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
musicians. It's usually everything ends with like, oh, we're on tour, go buy tickets, and then I see all this new stuff and it's like there's nothing. It just ends, and it's like so now you have to look at these business models of like sports people like streaming on Twitch for money, and then Travis Scott getting Fortnite percentage sale. I'm not saying he does. I'm just saying like that maybe that's something that
Yeah, sure. I
happens
mean, I
now.
hope he does. Well, and I'm really, the whole streaming thing has been really interesting to me too, because I've seen everybody turn on their streams. And I
Mm,
know that being able to connect with other people using audio and video has become insanely important, even just in terms of meetings. But I'm curious what will stick in terms of streaming. I've never been somebody that watched streamers
yeah.
because I don't feel like I have the time. Like, just
Hmm.
I can't wait for, like, sit there hoping, okay, I hope this stream is the time that something really interesting happens, versus watching pre-made videos, something like YouTube. That they edited out all the junk and you're just watching the 10 minutes of gold, and everything interesting that happened in their day is contained within this video. Whereas a
Yeah.
stream, it's like, well, there could be nothing for a very long time. And especially if you're watching non-professional streamers, and I'm not just talking about video games, this is anybody streaming their life.
Yeah.
Everyone's been
Yeah.
turning it on Instagram. That's where I've really seen the most, is people just
Yes.
turn on live because it's there.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean they have anything to say or they're doing anything interesting. So I'm curious how that's going to kind of level out. Like, will everybody keep streaming all the time, even though, may only be a dozen viewers or less?
Yeah.
Or are we, I don't know. I don't think it's obvious that even though it's blowing up right now, how's it going to shake out a year from now? This episode of the Stallman Podcast is brought to you by Modern Workplace, a podcast from Microsoft. Now, I don't know about you, but I love finding a great new show to listen to. And if you're looking for a new podcast, Modern Workplace is a monthly show that discusses the digital transformation and future of productivity. Each episode brings you access to business and technology leaders who are creating the future. Each episode has a focus topic, a deeper conversation with a Microsoft corporate vice president, plus related news and updates. And just so you have an idea of what to expect, let me tell you about some of the interesting topics that they've covered. Things like machine learning and AI, along with remote work and the art of teamwork, and also important things for any startup like cloud migration. I don't work at a tech startup anymore, but when I did last time, it was so interesting to me to see just how far things have come, where you can pretty easily get everything up and running without building a server in your closet. I mean, I know that anybody that is a sysadmin out there realizes how easy this is, but having Microsoft dig into it, they had a lot of really interesting insights into how that world operates right now. So go and listen right now. Just search for Modern Workplace wherever you get your podcasts. That's MODERNWORKPLACE, or just click on the link in the show notes and go get it now. Our thanks to Modern Workplace and Microsoft for their support of the show.
I don't think it's gonna let.
Do you watch streamers?
I do only for like research or like community aspects. Like if it's like with a company or something like that, I'll go support them. But like on my own, not really. There's some game streamers that I'll watch, like Shroud. Like I like games. I don't play them because I like games too much. So I don't play anymore. But like if a new game
Yeah.
like Valorant comes out, I'm watching. I'll watch the top streamers. You turn on Twitch, it's like, oh, there's like a million people watching Shroud play, right? Oh, I guess he's on Mixer, but like I'll get into a little bit of the hype cycle like that, or like if it's a live event for gaming, I'll watch like the TI or something like that for Dota. But in general, no, not really. Like I have things to do. I need to like, you know, if I want to turn off my brain, I'll go watch like a regular movie. And if I want like the
Mhm.
content, like content, I'll just watch YouTube. YouTube is way stronger for that. I don't think that like everyone streaming other than Zoom calls, that's going to be here for a very long time, will really last, because the people aren't going to ROI anything from it, and it just becomes like you're just not going to
Mhm.
do it. It's like the story of everyone that tried to make a Twitch channel, myself included. It's like it's just not going to be viable. It's not worth your time. It's like not going to work. So it's like it's really going to be like the titans of. It's always the top 0.01% of people that can actually make a
Mhm.
living at any fields of that type of thing, and that requires a lot of dedication, huge audience, and also like funding. It's expensive. Like if your audio is trash, it's like no, they're not. It's not going to work out long term. Video,
Yeah.
and then you have to be good at it. It's like you're more of an actor than anything else. When you're
Oh,
streaming,
for sure.
like for that kind of thing.
Even stuff like this, doing the podcast, I know that I get the opportunity to edit it afterwards. So
Hmm.
I can, we seem a lot smarter than we are sounding in real life. 'Cause if this was a stream, it would feel slower
Hmm.
than what people end up watching, right? Because if there's just a moment where you can't think of anything to say, it goes away. And that's what YouTube videos end up being, right? I've
Yeah,
actually noticed that on I was about to call it the Colbert Report, but I guess it's the Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
yeah.
They switched from a more, I don't know, switch, but have gradually been editing it more and more. The first few weeks where he was recording from home, there was a lot more mistakes, and
Hmm.
just you could see the technical difficulties and longer pauses, even just those awkward moments of, I don't know, that there's no applause and no laugh. So he
Yeah,
would kind
yeah.
of still wait for it to die out and it would slow down the pace. They've started cutting up the show a lot more, and you can just see that it's become more like a YouTube video and less like a live TV show. And I think it's absolutely for the better. It sucks some of the tension out of the room when things don't go the way that he wanted to, and just makes it funnier. I don't know. I think there's good reason for everybody to go and buy a better webcam.
Hmm.
Most of all, make sure you have some kind of real microphone. I think that ability to present yourself well to the outside world is way more important than ever. But yeah, like
Oh
we're
yeah.
saying, actually doing it for a big audience is not, I don't think will suddenly become really important or common or the most popular format of entertainment. Although I wouldn't have predicted Twitch in the first place, so maybe you just shouldn't ask me. But like
Get.
even in terms of the video game stuff, I've been watching a lot of video game
Hmm.
videos lately, and I'm not tempted to watch people play them live. It's much more like uh, either reviews or like thoughtful analysis. Like I've been watching animation breakdowns
Hmm.
of comparing Final Fantasy VII remake to the original Final Fantasy animation. That was an
Yeah.
interesting one, but
Yeah, gaming is its own thing because like people look at it like a sport. It's I think it's partially generational, and if you're into it or not, some like golf's pretty
Yeah.
big. I don't watch live golf events, but I hear millions of people do, and there's
I
lots
hear
of
it's
money
huge.
involved. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. So I think you look at game streaming, it's the same thing. You're either like, I love golf, and like I'll watch everything, and or you don't. So it's I don't know if that like is live. If that reflects like live streaming or not. But yeah, I agree. Like when it comes to internet stuff, it's like I don't need to watch live television anymore, right? Like sit through the commercials and whatnot. I'm like, I just want the 5 minutes that I like, and have YouTube curate what I like at the moment. Like their algorithm
Mhm.
updates like per second. You just start binging a certain thing, they're like, that's what you're getting recommended now. And I rely on those services at this point to find stuff, versus just like sitting through content. And it's like I think people look at that at a people who watch that just that's what they want to do though. It's like that's their social thing. It's like
I've had a little bit of appreciation for some of the older formats in one specific way. So, for one, with the news, I'd really gotten into the habit over the last 2 years of paying less attention to my local news. Like I would,
mhm,
go to all the big ones, right? To like international news websites and aggregators like Reddit to sort through everything. And I'm like, okay, I want the best writers in the world presenting me with my information.
mhm,
Whereas the local talent pool is maybe not the same. All of a sudden, I realized, well, my local news is suddenly a lot more important to me and to you and to everyone wherever you are. Knowing what's happening in your city has become way more important. And unfortunately, journalism's going through a fresh round of gutting lately, so local news is getting even harder to, really. Local journalism is getting more challenging to do well, but I've appreciated it a lot more. And then the other aspect is, I think there's also some value to. Okay, well, I don't want to get into like where do you get your news, because I think everybody, that's become a bit of a button to press. Like people have strong opinions about what is real and not real news, which is. But
yeah,
there's also some value in having your family like sitting down and watching the news together can also eliminate some of that discrepancy where like your closed group of people that you talk to, if you, when you're all getting completely different tidbits and then you try to talk about the same issue but you're all kind of banking these secret little nuggets of information that nobody else in the circle has received, it makes the conversation really difficult because you're not coming from the same place. Like, even if you want to disagree, which can be helpful, like it can be good to argue with your friends and family about, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? But
mhm.
when you're all coming at it with like different sets of facts from different places, it's really challenging to have a cohesive conversation about it. So there's this extra little bit of value if you just like watch the news on TV together, at least you started from the same place. And when you talk about it, you've all got the same information. That's just something I noticed recently, but
Yeah, because so like right before the lockdown, my family and I went to Disney World, and
nice, good,
like,
good idea.
yeah, was
Get it
it?
in while
I'm
you
not
can.
yeah, we don't know if it was a good idea or not. But yeah, constantly right before it, we're like, it really hadn't hit like at all. No one would have been like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, like no one would have been like, oh you're crazy, don't go at that point in time. It was like it's like, oh, we've heard about it, but it's like it's not in the States, like whatever, like go. And we went and came back. And it's like so just decisions like that. I remember like having a discussion about like it's like, oh, I wanted to go to the grocery store, and this is when it started to like really, because I'm in Massachusetts, so it's like real, and people in New York it's even realer, but Massachusetts is pretty up there, and we're not looking to come like we're not coming down from the curve, like the curve, the down part of the curve, that's not relevant to Massachusetts
Right.
if you guys follow
Yeah.
what's happening here, but like
We're,
or New York.
yeah. Locally in our city, we're also still, we got a pretty steep curve right now.
Yeah, and they're looking like our forecasting is not bright. Like whereas like some states are like, oh yeah, like Georgia and like middle states where there's not maybe as much crowds. They're like, oh yeah, well maybe we'll come back in like June or like a month or two. Like Massachusetts is like no, like not anytime, not anytime soon
Hmm.
at all. But so the big things about like, can I go to the grocery store? I remember that first discussion. I was like, cause like yeah, like what? What do you mean? I was like, I want to go. I really need to go get some stuff. And at the time, it was like there was a run on like Instacart, and all the delivery services were like empty, and no, you couldn't book anything. So it was kind of like right at the peak panic of Massachusetts, and it was like I need to go to the grocery store and get like food. for us. I have
Hmm.
2 kids. It's like we eat a lot. It's like we need to go. And yeah, we basically
Yeah, yeah.
to decide we just basically watched like, the news channel we watch. We don't have to say like that we watch, and just like other sources, and just talk to. I think the Facebook groups are really big for my wife. Like she's in contact with like lots of people locally that way.
Right.
And it was just basically, the consensus was basically like, no, like if you really don't have to, it's probably not worth it. So yeah, I think it's your point being that it's like you kind of have to, especially as like in a family unit. It's like, if I go out and come back and like drag in some bad stuff, it's like that affects everyone. So yeah, having everyone kind of at least watch
Just
it
get
or
on the same
discuss.
page.
Yeah, yeah, like with the
Yeah.
strategy, because like we're all working with incomplete information, and even more incomplete these days because it's all 100% remote information. Like I don't talk to like too many like actual people about it, like at the water cooler, so
Hmm.
to speak. It's like yeah, you get it from who you get your news from, who you get it from, and if like that has any sort of like tainting or whatever in it, it's like that's what you know. Like I'm not out
Yeah.
there like at the hospitals. I have no idea what's happening, so I'm 100% relying on like
I
Twitter
feel
and
like
like Reddit.
the only advice I'm qualified to give on this is how we talk about it, because I think we all need to remember what you just said, that all of our information is incomplete. So any of us that go and try to become the expert to everyone and you are the one that has the true information and all your friends received the wrong information, and if you find yourself becoming that, so too pedantic about it, it can like break down the trust between us. It can, I've heard of it, severing close relationships because people just can't talk to each other when they're too far on different sides of it. I think everybody at least just be very aware that how you're talking about it, if you are only driving people away, whatever side you're on, whatever end of the scale, it's like you need to still be able to communicate in a way that your people are listening to you, and that you're not also breaking down relationships just to hope to get your point across, because if now you're just not talking to your friends and family anymore, you're not, we haven't accomplished much. And I've had this feeling that a lot of people are kind of willing to, um, their expressing of their very strong opinions can become more important than the relationships with the people they're trying to get those opinions across to. So I don't know. I just want to remind everybody, like, be humble with your knowledge. Like we are all trying to figure this out, and none of us have yet. And if somebody that is expressing perfect knowledge, it's probably a little bit of overconfidence at this point, because we're still waiting to find out a lot of the most important things about what's happening right now. So I don't know. That's my message for the day to try to
Ba-
keep us all getting along.
Basically, don't go on Twitter. That's basically where like even some of the people like
I've
I
Yeah.
adore, they're just like, oh man, like we're going down this street today. Like, and I get it
Hmm.
because like you're
I've had
home and
better
it's
luck on
like,
Twitter than other places. I found when
oh
I log
really?
on to
Okay.
Facebook, which isn't that often, my Facebook is the most weird. And I think it's because for one, on Twitter, I'm really selective about who I follow. Like, I don't follow
Yeah.
that many people.
Hmm.
And if people start getting obnoxious, I'm pretty quick to unfollow them. Whereas
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Facebook, it's a lot more about personal and historical relationships, where it would like send a message to real life friends or family if you were to unfollow them. So your feed just is what it is, and it's harder to change in a way. And then those fights on Facebook are more like personal and aggressive because people know each other in real life more. I don't know, that's what I found, but I
do,
know everybody's feed is obviously different.
do you know why my Facebook feed is very clean? I
What?
have 0 friends.
Oh,
I
you've solved it. You solved the
this was
problem.
this was years ago. I made the decision to leave personal quote unquote Facebook. I still am extremely
Mhm.
active on Facebook, mostly through groups. I run groups. That's like my whole thing right now, and I run them very well, in my opinion. But I don't, and I have pages, and of course, Instagram is a huge part of my business. Like day to day, I track how Instagram like affects everything. But like when it
Mhm.
comes to personal stuff, de-added my entire family. I have presidents of very big companies trying to keep adding me, and I'm just like, I have 0 friends, and I just write back. I was like, I don't do that one. I don't do that. Wait, LinkedIn's its own special thing. Twitter, sure, follow if you want to. YouTube, same thing.
Mhm.
But I don't like the conflation of like what you said. It's like, oh, these are historical, personal, family relationships on
Right.
Facebook. Facebook is lovely if you're listening. I use your service. We should talk. But like, um, with what you're
Yeah.
doing with VR, I would love to chat. But like, yeah, no, that's That's they've gotten under the skin of that type of society, that type of relationship, because it's in my opinion it's not, and that's why I'm like, oh, so I de-added my family. Are we not family? Like, or my friends, I'm like, email me, call me. But like, yeah, Facebook has this kind of skew to it that, especially with their current algorithm, it's just like I don't engage. So yes, I can see like why Facebook is probably has more like aggressive things on it.
But everybody creates their feeds differently too. Like I know there's a lot of people that Twitter does become really toxic for them and
Oh,
becomes the
yes.
place to battle. And I just don't. That's not my Twitter experience. I don't know what I'm doing differently, but it hasn't ended up there at all. It's
Heavily curating is
generally,
doing it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's
And
just paying attention to who you follow and who you don't, and not
I think
not creating toxic atmospheres for yourself.
I think the difference on Twitter with Facebook, like Facebook posts do go viral, like personals. It is possible. It does happen. I see it every once in a while, but like more or less, it's like your community who are like seeing it on Twitter. Like you say something, it could be. It's one of the fun parts of Twitter. Someone has like some random thought. They have like 100 followers. They probably don't ever post, and it's some random thought, and it goes
Oh, totally. Yeah.
viral, like just like bigger
Yeah.
numbers than like the Super Bowl, like all of a sudden. So it's those kind of things that like, especially if it's like one of those polarizing topics, like pick any topic, I guess these days. It's like
Hmm.
then you get the doc storm. Then people start researching like where you live and your family, and the whole storm hits you, and it's like, well, like it literally can affect everything, like your business, your personal
Hmm.
mental health. Like, so that's the one thing I see about Twitter is that like it could be like some famous person would be like, this bad person, I'm gonna retweet this and be like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah. The
garbage. And it's
risk
like
can be
those are
there.
huge people, and like they do that, and that's what Twitter is. And it's like, so then you end up on the receiving end. So I know people that's happened to. I've never had anything like on a negative side happen. Like if Casey Neistat retweets something, like that's a positive storm,
Right. Yeah.
and those type of people. But it's like on the negative side, it's like, oh my god, like people like, it's just like, okay, here comes 1,000 death threats to my main email address, and like they're gonna start like finding my family's email addresses, and they're like, you know what I mean? Like that's what happens, and it's like, that's Twitter. Like that's what you play with when you're on there. I try to keep it very neutral. Like anything's retweetable. No one should get like too angry about it. But like on this topic, yeah, I see Twitter stuff just be like destroy people like who are not ready for it.
Well, let's try to talk about something fun for a second.
Yeah,
I've
edit
been,
that out.
I so rarely have time to play video games, and I decided that that's one of the things I'm going to take advantage of now. And so I've been playing Final Fantasy VII, and that has been Final Fantasy VII Remake, which
Mm-hmm.
I've been excited about for years and years and years and years. And I don't know, I don't know where I'm ever going to create content about it because I've never made any gaming content, but it's on my mind, and I know you at least started it up, and you at least care about it and have
Mm-hmm.
opinions about it.
You should make a video about it, man. Like Justine did her Animal Crossing videos, and
I don't have a way to. I don't have a capture card yet, so I
oh,
ordered the
okay,
new Atom Mini Pro, and it's going to be at least like a month before it arrives. So
yeah.
I can't record gaming content yet.
So you just have to you just have to enjoy it. Yeah, Final Fantasy is lovely. I
Yeah,
mean, that works into my wheelhouse. A Final Fantasy remake is made with Unreal Engine, so I've
yeah. That's why I wanted to hear what you thought about it.
yeah, I follow it very closely. It's very high level humans. They look very good. Filmable. Obviously that's a form of content, is to make a 10-hour interactive movie. That's the
Yeah,
video game
yeah.
industry.
I
It's
mean,
quite viable at this point.
that's one thing I was wondering. Like, what did you see through a I don't know. I don't know if I can call you a developer, but through your developer lens, like, what did you see when you played the game? I mean, those characters to me looked absolutely unbelievable. They looked hard to believe it was real time sometimes. And is it as good as I think it is? Like, and also, wait, I guess I shouldn't pack too much into one question. If if this was pre-rendered using the same models and Unreal Engine, how much better could it look? Like, how much is my hardware limiting me with Unreal Engine's game engine?
Well, the PlayStation is a very low powered spec, like very
Yeah, it's
low.
getting old.
It's old platform. Like my computer's insane, but like my computer's like hundreds of times faster. Like it's just way
Mhm.
more. So it's impressive what they did. So they funneled all of the quality into the digital humans. Like if there's like a meme about it, with more like within developers, that it's like the cloud's hair is like the entire rendering budget, and then like the buildings, if you look kind of like watch, the building textures are like 64 by 64 or 120, like just
Mhm.
tiny resolution, because you have a budget. You have literally a memory budget. It's like some of it goes here, some of it goes there. They put it all in the characters, and that's it's like a soap opera. So it's like it makes sense to put it there. But basically, if you were to move it onto PS5 or onto just PC, like if they made a PC version of it, they do a whole remastering pass, and like the whole thing would be like 4K um, textures, like quality wise, because you'd have like you could spec for like a 1070, something like that. So the environment would look a lot nicer. But that's pretty much it. They did a really good job optimizing it. Unreal Engine has all the tricks to make it fit onto PlayStation in Switch games. Like that's kind of what it's made for. But it looks, it wouldn't look massively different. Probably just better environments. But the characters themselves are incredible.
What about if we compare it to Advent Children? If we just looked at those side by side, like have we come far enough that a remastered Final Fantasy VII remake could it look better than what was happening in Advent Children at this point? Or is that, like, is the engine still not at the same point as the tools that were used to make a feature film a few years ago?
They're not quite there yet for the consumer, I would say. Very much what I do right now is like get very high spec computers and attempt to film game stuff like it was pre-rendered, post what is like the CG movies, because I am able to do the big difference is the lighting. Like real-time lighting on a game is very basic because it's very expensive to do unless you have a Quadro 8000 and like a full system. Then I'm doing essentially like post rendering but at real time because my hardware is just so like insane. So like for me, like doing virtual production, I am almost able to get that kind of like post rendered fidelity out of the lighting, and the models are already there. But on your hardware on a PS4, it's a pretty big difference from what I see. But for like maybe for the average person, they may not notice it. Like the non-photographers, like even though you may not do CG, you can probably look at the lighting and just the general image of it, from a filmmaking and photography point of view. But people that don't care that much, they're not looking that closely. It's like it probably doesn't look all that different to them. I don't think that there's um, a big difference. But if we look closely at the lighting and like that sort of stuff, it's still there. But maybe by if they're still making PlayStations, like PS6 or something like that,
Mhm.
where you have like essentially like what the today's 2080 Ti in it, it's like you could probably do it, and the software just gets better. Like you get better at tricking it, and there's new optimization
Right.
tricks. But currently today, it's a pretty big difference between a PS4 and a movie. But it's with the right hardware, they could be very similar.
Well, and I've got to just to compliment the game a bit too. I've got to say, like the art in it, just in terms of design and choices of how things look, is at such a high level. That is so much of what makes it incredible. It's not, it's running hardware that we've been using for years now, and the fact that we can still be blown away this late into the game is always fun. I mean, a lot of the time that's when the most incredible games come out, is pretty late into any hardware generation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's things like, um, I think that a lot of non creator gamers would think about in terms of just lighting and camera placement, those choices, not just the abilities of the hardware, but creative choices by the game developers go so far in it feeling cinematic. I mean, it's a lot of why, even when I watch old clips of the first Metal Gear Solid on PS1, it still looks cinematic because there was people with great cinematography intuitions making these decisions about camera choices. It's not, even though the graphics are terrible. And so this is still happening now. It's like, even though there could be higher fidelity graphics in this game, the creative decisions are so inspired and incredibly beautiful that that's what lets you just be completely absorbed in the world. And yeah, I mean, my overall impressions of the game are really positive. Like it's one of the most beautiful things I played in a long time. It's the most I've cared about a game in a while. And but maybe because of that, I have the longest list of complaints as well. Kind of like Star Wars. Like I love Star Wars, but there's no movie I could complain about more than Star Wars
Oh,
because you
now
watch
we're
it
polarizing
closely and you
people
pay
with that
attention.
one.
Well, yeah, it's just like I complain because I care. I have a lot more that I could complain about on Macs or iOS than on Windows, just because I'm familiar with it and I'm so close to it that
Hmm.
even though it's my world that I choose to live in, I could definitely see how I would choose to improve it to make it better. So I don't know. There's definitely a long list of stuff I've been seeing in Final Fantasy VII Remake because of that.
You
But
should
at the
do
same
it.
time, I absolutely love it.
You got to get that capture card. You should make the video. You should just like,
Yeah.
I mean, like there's, I mean, in my opinion, I don't know, like I don't know your business strategy and whatnot, but it's like, I live streamed Call of Duty Mobile like for a couple days there. You know, I was like so into it, and it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen like professional, quote unquote, professional mobile gaming. You wear like gloves on your fingers, and like
No,
it's
I have not. What?
you use 6 fingers at once. Oh, it's a whole thing, a whole category. It's all like iPad professional gaming, because you use 6 fingers like the claw, and you have gloves
That
on your
is
fingers so they don't
crazy.
get sweaty. And like I streamed it, I was into it. I bought the adapters to like put it on Twitch and like YouTube, and I was like, I don't really care if people care about this. Like, I mean, I approach YouTube a little bit differently now. That was like a couple months ago, but like if you're into it, you just gotta. I feel like you just gotta get it out. You know, even if like, I mean, if you go to my YouTube channel now, like there's like 8 videos because I got rid of all the old. But it's like, but at the time, I had to make it. You know, it's like feel compelled to make it. That's like what drives everything. I was just like, today I must do this, and I just
Yeah.
do it. It sounds like you're at that level of
Well, yeah, right now
of
I just got a
compulsion with
note
Final
that's
Fantasy.
filling up of things I want to say, but so much of the challenge is like the format for me. Like what,
Mm,
YouTube and video wants a certain type of content,
yeah.
and I want to do it justice, right? I want to put the time in that it deserves. So a lot of the time that just means B-roll that accurately represents what you're talking about.
Yes, that is game.
And
That is gaming.
that
Yes,
is so time consuming, Yeah. And
it
even
really
when you're
is.
not filming it yourself, if you're just playing the game, it's like, well, I still want the clips that represent the thing that I'm referring to. And that can take a lot of time to capture. But I know I want to do it. So
You just record the whole playthrough. I mean, that's basically it. Yeah, because you can't just like scrub back in time. It's like, well, I have to go play that level again, but it's like 8 hours into the game. It's like, oh,
yeah,
like
exactly.
yeah,
Is
just
that what people do? I don't even know what they do.
yeah, yeah. It's like
Ugh,
from what I hear from some of those people that do that, it's like script writing can take a month, just to write it.
right.
Um, and then recording it is like also a month because you might have to play the game like 5 times or something to get the clip, and then your script might change. It's like a very long process. But for the people that make a living at it, it's quite viable when you combine it with Twitch streaming, like Jack Frags and like the top guys. It's like they're doing real well. But it is a tremendous a lot of work. It's like, oh, you get to play video games all day. It's like it's super hard, super annoying.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
how much footage you end
Except
up
for,
with,
I mean,
like it's a pain in the ass.
that does make streaming so appealing though, that not that they're not working hard, but that you can just turn it on and start going. So much of the like resistance to me making new content
Mm-hmm.
is knowing what I want to do, sort of having the confidence of the moment of, I know that what I have to say about it is interesting. I know that I'm going to be able to create something visually beautiful about it. Whereas even podcasting here, all of that resistance is gone because I'm like, well, if I run out of things to say, I've got a great guest on that can bounce something back at me. The expectation is that you're going to hear a conversation, so it's going to be back and forth, and I don't need to necessarily have a really unique, interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I so often I find that pressure of YouTube, which is what I do all the time. Like I do a lot of YouTube. I know how to do it, but I still
Mm-hmm.
want everything to be good, and that slows me down in actually ever creating any of it
Yeah.
because I sort of have that expectation on myself.
Yeah, and I tell people that are like streaming, it's like there's if you stream for YouTube, it's more like a webinar. You kind of typically have to be like, we're gonna do this thing, but we're gonna do it like you're basically gonna read a YouTube video live and then have a Q&A at the end. That's pretty much the format.
Right.
At least for from what I see is successful. Whereas Twitch, it's like if you don't stream for 6 to 8 hours, you might as well not. Right. And it's like, so that's not as
So
planned.
insane to me.
Yeah, so they're different cultures because
I just can't make
I
sense
spent
of
a
it.
year on
Yeah.
Twitch, and it's like
Hmm.
to kind of learn it and understand it as I was transitioning into games. Like I wasn't making 2 years ago. I was like, I'm going to start making games, like essentially, working in game
Well,
engines.
and
And
we didn't talk about that at all, by the way, that you make Cinetracer.
that's like
But
we
like,
don't have to at all.
no, no, no. But I'm also curious where it's at right now. So like, I was using it last time we talked. I hadn't used it yet, and I have since. Um, where's it at right now? Like, what are you working more on? It feels like I see you doing videos in the real world a little bit more than in development world at this moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so like to put it like bluntly, Cinetracer, I opened up Unreal Engine one day and I used like a template that everyone can have. It just kind of like gets you up and running for like a third person game.
Mm.
And 2 years later, that's Cinetracer, and I didn't really like conceive of it to be like a product like it truly has evolved to. It's really just like I was like, oh, it'd be cool if we had a tripod, and I made a tripod. I was like, well, what if that tripod could like pan around,
Yeah.
and we put a camera in it, and like literally it was like that question for 2 years straight, and I streamed it on Twitch because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and people would come in and help me. That's why I was on Twitch for UE4 streaming, as all the other devs would be like, "Oh, this guy's streaming," and like they would literally tell me how to program it because I don't know. I'm just learning still. It's like 2 years is not that long into
That's
any
so interesting. Yeah.
profession. So it's been 2 years of like, okay, so what if we turned on ray tracing? Okay, that's a nightmare. It's very hard to learn, you know. It's like, oh, what if we made humans and cars and different maps? And it's like, think about learning anything for the first time, but then having that be something that people like judge you on. And like, it's like, so that's what that project is. And so that makes it seem not so good. But like to put it in perspective for today, it's not on pause, but I focus very hard on making like next level stuff, if that makes sense. Like max the hardware out. What can I do?
Mm.
And I'm using that in Unreal Engine, and so that's what a lot of the demos are today. Like the equipment in my house, no normal person will have this ever. Like it's like in the next couple of months here, you'll see it. But I'm testing it at super high level, and then we see what kind of comes back down that I can put into Cinetracer, because Cinetracer always has to be fit to work on like a MacBook Pro or like a
Mm-hmm.
Razer with like a 2080 Max Q, which that might sound like a lot for average gaming and stuff like that. But when it comes to real time stuff, that stuff is not very powerful. So I at this point I see Cinetracer as kind of like, well, I can execute super high end stuff, and that's what I've been doing the last 2 months, like really high end. And it's like, and what from that comes down to the kind of consumer level, when it comes to virtual production or previs and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of the way I look at
Mm-hmm.
it. So like anytime I learn something like really cool and I'm like, oh, I can simplify this and I can get it to fit on like, just like we're talking about like a PS4 kind of budget, then I'll kind of put it into Cinetracer. So it kind of becomes like my once I really learn something in Unreal Engine, then I'll basically put it in there. It might be similar to like if someone learns how to do some crazy After Effects thing and then they make it a plugin, right? They're like, oh, I wrote this whole thing and it makes it really easy to make it whatever, I don't know, some sort of motion graphic in 3D. It would have taken that other people would never learn it because it's programming, and you put it in a plugin, right? So it's like, um, that's kind of where it is on like a bigger context for me. As a product, it's blown up like huge, like massive, way bigger than I was
And
expecting.
just what it is for anybody listening, how do you describe it in like 15 words or something?
Oh yeah, so it's like it's basically like Fortnite, except you have realistic cameras and lights. That's truly the way
Yeah.
I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as far as accessibility, it's like mouse and keyboard, somewhat of an Xbox controller is semi supported, and yeah, you have you can put people in there, put lights on them, look at them through a camera, and then we're kind of just experimenting, like, oh, how good can this look, and like how do we make things that are complicated like level building somewhat simpler, so that you don't have to learn 3D. And filmmakers use it for storyboarding. And now, given the current lockdown of every film school in the world has reached out to me, like literally every
Right.
single film school, like every day, constantly,
Yeah.
to
I can
teach
imagine.
filmmaking through it, because it's like, that's great. It's a great medium, like if you need to go like, hey, what's focal length, it's like, you're not going to get into the classroom anytime soon, like in the next year. um it's serving a need there already. And then for the people that are really interested, it's like, if you want to do virtual production, which is like still kind of like a, what does that even mean, I'm building like really basic virtual production stuff in there so that you can like try it. Like if you have a Vive just hanging out, you can do like a virtual camera with it. So it's an interesting project. It's blown up, so it's like my full-time job to do it. But I consider it kind of like the basic version of what you might see me doing on like Instagram. Like it's like a consumer packaged version, which is, it's just fun. Like I think a lot of software companies are creative companies, right? It's like you create this special tech that you do, and then like that's you sit on it. Like only we can do that, and we charge a lot of money if you want to do it. It's a service, right? So instead of doing that kind of thing, which I'm kind of starting to do again actually, but like I was like, how about I just make that tool available to everyone and see how that goes? And so it's gone quite well, because like, it's basically just like my personal Unreal Engine project that I've built a lot of cool stuff into, and I can basically share with people. It's an interesting software model.
How far off do you think virtual production is from being I don't know how you describe mainstream, but mainstream, I don't know, something that people are I don't know, that's happening a lot on, especially like I was saying, maybe in the commercial world, like just in terms of like, when would you predict right now that every city in the world will have a dozen of these running at any given time?
End of this year, probably.
Yeah.
If it's just like 10 studios in every, well, not like, major filming community. End of this
Hmm.
year at this rate,
Cool.
like the amount of interest in it, considering the lockdown, considering the practicality of it, is very, very high. And also virtual production, on a broader scope for broadcast, almost not every, but like the majority of the big TV studios already have it. It's already built in. It
Right.
just doesn't look
Right.
cinematic.
They've
It's
seen it
like,
coming for a
oh,
while. Yeah.
but they've been using it for 10 years. It's like, if you watch,
Hmm.
like, I don't know if you've seen like the Weather Channel has like a guy standing there and like a tree explodes next to him, or like the
Yeah, I
studio
guess that counts.
floods. It definitely does. It's just a
Yeah.
different delivery
Yeah.
because it's like news and it's all wide shots. It's not cinematic. But if they zoomed in, went out of focus, and changed the lights, it's all of a sudden Mandalorian.
Hmm.
Same tech. So technically, it's probably at the scale you're talking about. It's already here. It's just the format, right? Like, it's more live events and news and whatnot, used for cinema and commercials, is still the niche part. But if what you're looking for is like there's 10 studios in every major filming community, that already exists. But bringing it to like maybe so that like, you're like $500,000 commercial execution, something like that, is using it, that's still what's kind of like coming down, because it kind of requires like a standing studio. You can't just like
Hmm.
rent it for the day really and be like, cool, let's just do it for today. It's like it needs a little bit more like infrastructure usually.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to learn how to do it myself and for it to be all around us. And I'll keep watching you on Instagram to see where it's going. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you.